Good evening, members. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Council. Before we commence the meeting, I would like to ask those present to join with me in a minute's silence to mark the anniversary of the first lockdown. We can reflect on how life has changed during this year and remember the people who have lost their lives during the coronavirus pandemic and their families who mourn them. We should also remember that many people lost loved ones during this period due to reasons other than COVID, and that their families were also unable to visit them in hospital and attend funerals. We may also wish to think of people who have lost their jobs or suffered in other ways. And we may just want to pause at this time to reevaluate as to what we now consider important. Let us hope for and look forward to a better future, especially following the rollout of the vaccination programme, to which so many have contributed. Please join me in a minute's silence to reflect on this. Thank you. Now to the meeting. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are muted and cameras switched off when you are not speaking, that you do not interrupt other speakers. Members are reminded not to use the messaging chat function during the meeting unless it is to report a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest or to notify the chair that you wish to make a proposal. That if you are attending the meeting, to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Additionally, you'll be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair. Please await your turn. If members lose connection to the meeting, please contact the Member Support Officer, Mandy Smith, as soon as possible. As this is a virtual meeting, you will not need to stand to address the chair. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting, you are also consenting to being filmed by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Can I move to the agenda now, please? Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Barrett and Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Declaration of interest by councillors. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 3, BC 2027, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd February 2021 for accuracy only. Are there any issues with accuracy? Councillor Osborne, did you want to comment on the minutes? You're on mute. Councillor Osborne, you're on mute.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chairman. I was going to propose the minutes.
Okay, I'll just check that there are no other comments. Fine. Yes, thank you, Councillor Osborne.
Apologies,
Can I,
Madam Chairman.
that's no problem. Can I have a seconder, please?
So I'll second it, Madam Chairman. Councillor Peterbeer.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. So we have a proposer and seconder. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the vote is now opening in modern.gov. Please can you go to the cross and mark your vote? Thank you. Councillor Beer, Councillor Maybury, Councillor Plum and Councillor Lindsay, we are still waiting your vote. Are you able to do so, or would you like me to take your vote verbally?
Could you do me verbally, please? It's Robert Lindsay here.
Yeah, can I have your vote, please?
Yeah, it's yes, agreed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Plum?
Agreed. I thought I had voted.
Okay. Councillor Maybury? Councillor Maybury, are you able to cast your vote, or would you like to do it verbally? Okay, Chair, we'll go without Councillor Maybury at the moment. I think she might be having technical problems.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a unanimous vote. So the minutes of the meeting have been confirmed and will be signed at the next practicable opportunity. Item 4, announcements from the chairman and leader. I refer you to paper BC 2028 for noting. And in fact, one of the meetings didn't take place. So that's not absolutely accurate. But apart from that, that's all I have to say on that for now. Councillor Ward, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I did, and I'll just start bringing that up on the screen. Today, members, on this National Day of Reflection, earlier we stood united in remembering those who have lost their lives as a result of COVID. Our thoughts are with those who have lost loved ones and seen their lives impacted in ways they could not have imagined a year ago. We pay tribute to our teams, our public sector colleagues, and the army of volunteers who have kept essential services running and supported our communities in the face of unprecedented challenges. The rollout of the vaccine and availability of community testing brings hope for the year ahead if we continue to follow the guidelines. In the meantime, we will continue to support the recovery of our towns and businesses so that Babergh continues to be somewhere people are proud to call home post-COVID and beyond. Now, the latest data actually shows a continuing decline again in the infection rate to levels not seen since last summer. And here in Babergh, it is now down to 19.6 per 100,000, the lowest in the county and a long way from the nearly 640 per 100,000 that we had in early January. We are, however, seeing a slight rise in parts of the county following the reopening of schools and a significant increase in testing. There is further good news in that the death rate is now not above the seasonal average. The vaccination rollout in Suffolk is still going very well, one of the best in England. And in Babergh, almost everyone over 50 has now had their first vaccination. Many have now had both doses, and this will be the focus of the vaccination programme next month. Let's hope any short-term reduction in supply won't delay the removal of lockdown restrictions and we can have a good summer. You will have seen that Babergh and Mid Suffolk have been shortlisted in 3 categories of this year's IEASY Public Sector Transformation Awards, including Council of the Year. This is really exciting news and a testament to the innovation that is at the heart of everything we do and also to the excellence of our staff. It is a welcome counterweight to the disinformation peddled about us on social media. Please watch the videos, they are very good. And now I want to address the continuing rancour over the future of the Bellevue site in Sudbury. I know that the chosen way forward is not liked by some, but it is gratifying that this is balanced by others who understand that something needs to be done and that a pragmatic solution has been found that stands a chance of being implemented. There is a myth that we didn't consider all 6 bids or didn't give them equal consideration. This is nonsense. In addition to bid price, all were assessed equally and fairly against the same qualitative criteria, which were listed in the public paper. All bidders were contacted during the process, none was ignored, and those who had not included sufficient information by the end date were given a further 2 weeks to provide more. The selected bid scored significantly higher overall than the others, meeting the Section 123 criterion to dispose of land for the best consideration that can reasonably be obtained. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee decided overwhelmingly yesterday that we had conducted the Cabinet debate in a proper manner, and that our decision was therefore sound. Following the demise of the hotel bid, we took on board the strong desire to see a new entrance to the park from the town and developed a compromise solution that will be funded from the sale and has the huge advantage in that it can be delivered. It is a pity that others aren't prepared to compromise as well and support a solution that will finally see the regeneration of this gateway to the town and deliver a park that the whole town can be proud of. While on the subject of Sudbury, I just want to remind members that we have already put a huge amount of investment into the town and that we are proposing much more with our vision for prosperity. This investment, either directly from Babergh or from the grants we have been able to secure, now amounts to over £4 million in the past few years. So, contrary to another myth that we neglect the town and don't spend anything there, we do and will continue to do so. It is our principal town, the engine of our economy, and we are determined that it will be transformed to be fit for the coming decades. A town for the 2050s, not the 1950s. Unfortunately, this investment isn't appreciated by all, and to paraphrase a well-known film, it does seem to be a case of, but apart from the leisure centre upgrade, the financial support for cultural venues, the environmental improvements including solar carports, the CCTV, new council housing, additional temporary accommodation, the virtual high street, the vision master plan, and investment in park facilities, what has Babergh ever done for us? Unfortunately, for those who remember the scene in the film, we can't claim the last item mentioned. The Romans may have brought peace, but it seems we're still some way off that in Sudbury. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Item 5, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with Council Procedure Rules.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, questions by the public in accordance with Council Procedure Rules. I refer you to the question in the tabled papers. I would like to invite Mr. Morelli to ask his question. Mr. Morelli, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So my question is to Councillor Holt. In the Cabinet's recent decision of the sale of the land at Bellevue, and during the Cabinet debate on the item, why was seemingly little or no notice taken and little or no regard had to Sudbury Town Council's views on the future of Bellevue, as outlined in the report of the Bellevue Working Party? And why was this report and the Town Council's views seemingly dismissed by yourself as being, quote, late in the day, without a true consideration of the merits on which the report was based?
Thank you, Mr. Morelli. I would now like to invite Councillor Holt to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Morelli, for your question. It is very tempting to be drawn into answering your question by giving a detailed account of Cabinet's decision making at its last meeting. As you will appreciate, however, that has already been carried out by our Overview and Scrutiny Committee, following the calling of the Cabinet's decision, and also by Sudbury Town Council at its extraordinary meeting last week. It is also tempting, as it would allow me to correct several of the inaccuracies or assumptions that were presented at the Town Council meeting. I will resist the temptation, though, as I really do not think it is helpful or healthy for the district or town council to get into the habit of critiquing each other's meetings. What is more important is that we respect one another's differences of views where they exist, and work together for the residents of Sudbury that we both represent. With that in mind, you are correct that I observed that the Town Council's formal stance was received not long before the Cabinet met. The Town Council's views were and are, however, clear and easily understood, and so formed a proper part of Cabinet's collective considerations in reaching its decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Mr. Morelli, would you like to ask a supplementary question? You're on mute.
Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, and I apologise. And with your permission, Chair, I would like to ask the following supplementary question. Could I ask Councillor Holt what steps he is taking to ensure that the views of Sudbury Town Council are taken into account as a key factor when Babergh are making decisions that affect the town, including those related to Bellevue, especially as, judging by the Town Council's public meetings, they do not currently seem to feel that their views are being considered by Babergh very much, if at all.
Councillor Holt, would you like to reply?
Yes, I pick up on Mr. Morelli's comments, and I would say that currently we are undergoing some meetings with Sudbury Town Council. We've met with the clerk and one other council member recently twice to discuss not only Bellevue but other projects and opportunities coming forward for Sudbury. I understand, as I say, that you have concerns, and I think Sudbury Town Council and their residents have concerns that possibly we aren't getting on, as I said, as well as perhaps we should be. But from my point of view, and I appreciate the Cabinet has this view as well, that we will work tirelessly to ensure that that relationship improves, and that for the good of Sudbury and the local community, we will work very, very hard to ensure that we are more attuned and have more dialogue and open conversation, so that in future, hopefully the Town Council and the District Council will present themselves in a much better way to the public.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Thank you, and this is the end of this public question section. Item 7, questions by councillors in accordance with council procedure rules.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 8, BC 2029, Overview and Scrutiny Committee report. I would like to invite Councillor McCraw to introduce paper BC 2029, which is for noting. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce the report BC 2029. You find on pages 29 to 36 of today's papers. They cover meetings held by Overview and Scrutiny on the 18th of January, the subjects there being the town centre parking and the budget. The 15th of February, where we discussed citizens' advice, and once again on the 15th of February, a review of a petition validation. The report is a little lengthier than I would normally make it, due to the high degree of public interest in many of these matters. I think it speaks for itself. I've endeavoured to make it as complete as possible, and I'm happy to take any questions now or after the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. Are there any questions for Councillor McCraw? Councillor Mabry.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question, it is a comment, because Councillor McCraw has mentioned the Citizens' Advice. I declare that I am a director of the Citizens' Advice in Sudbury. I also wish to apologise that I had temporarily lost contact, but I am back now, so my apologies.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any further questions for Councillor McCraw? Thank you. Well, in that case, if there are no further questions we'll move on. And thank you, Councillor McCraw. That report was for noting. We'll move on to item 9, BC 2030, Community Infrastructure Levy, SIL Expenditure Framework, third review, March 2021. I would like to invite Councillor Arthey to introduce paper BC 2030 and to move the recommendations in the report. Councillor Arthey.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, just a little bit of background. As I'm sure you're all aware, the SIL Expenditure Framework was originally agreed and adopted by both Babergh and Mid Suffolk in March 2018. It has been reviewed twice through the work of the Joint Member Panel and has also been to joint overview and scrutiny on both occasions. The first and second reviews led to changes being made to the framework and the communications strategy in March 2019 and April 2020. It was agreed in April 2020 that the SIL Expenditure Framework would be reviewed again in October 2020, with any changes being put in place before the next bid round, that's bid round number 7, which opens on the 1st of May. Also, that the Joint Member Panel would inform the third SIL Expenditure Framework review process. The third review has taken place with the Joint Member Panel. You see it, paragraph 1.3 of your report, and the Council report and the changes to Appendix A, which is the SIL Expenditure Framework, and the comms strategy, which is Appendix B, are the outcomes of the panel. And I bring this paper to you on their behalf. There are some key changes, and they're set out in full in the report in paragraph 4.5. The main change relates to cross-boundary bids. So with development close to our district boundaries, we anticipate demand for contributions from neighbouring authorities. So there are new additional criteria for dealing with such SIL bids. In simple terms, they must be collaborative, so Babergh will not contribute 100%. Babergh and Mid Suffolk's SIL spend must be proportionate to what's being provided, and the most important bit that we thought was that it must be linked by evidence to the impacts of growth within Babergh, which must address the evidence-based impacts. So, in other words, if there's a proposal, we must have the evidence to support why the bid is coming to us, and we must have the evidence of how the growth is being impacted to support that bid. They must be specifically deliverable projects with timescales for delivery, and they must have all of the necessary formal approvals in place. Also, that we should be the final part of the funding jigsaw, so that SIL bids, so that SIL funds are not tied up in projects that aren't going to be delivered. They must be capital-based specific projects that address the growth impacts. We will not fund projects which are not classed as infrastructure. The specific infrastructure projects must be listed in the infrastructure delivery plan and within the infrastructure funding statement. The same engagement process for parish councils and ward members and for the county councillors as already set out in the framework. and all such CIL expenditure beyond each district's administrative and geographical boundaries shall be cabinet decisions. That is, no matter what the value of our contribution, the decision will be made by cabinet, not under delegated powers. All CIL bids for expenditure beyond the district's boundaries must come from adjoining local authorities and infrastructure providers. So in that regard, we will not expect community bids from communities outside of our district boundary. Move to the CIL expenditure framework communication strategy, which is at Appendix B. The key changes there are really updates. They're intended to try and get the CIL message across a little bit more successfully. So they provide some clear key messages on a fact sheet type basis to cover different aspects of CIL for our website. They propose that we continue with regular briefing sessions for members and also parishes. And there's also an alteration of the wording to reflect that parish briefings will take place in a virtual setting. Okay. We need to continue to improve communication around CIL, particularly for members and parishes. And the working group identified that there is still a lack of awareness amongst some district councillors and quite a lot of parishes. So the recommendations are at 3.1, that Babergh and Mid-Suffolk councils, this is obviously something that's got to be agreed by both, approve the amendments to the CIL expenditure framework, March 2021, which has arisen from the third review, that's Appendix A, and the CIL expenditure framework communication strategy, March 2021, which is Appendix B. 3.2, that Babergh and Mid-Suffolk agree that the CIL expenditure framework and the CIL expenditure framework communication strategy be reviewed again whilst bid round 8 is being considered, that's in October 2021, so that any amended scheme can be in place before bid round 9 occurs, May 2022. So I think it's fairly clear here. You can see the annual review. So we have the CIL panel, we have the approval, we have the ONS scrutiny, and then we come around to the next year. And finally, at 3.3, that Babergh agrees the joint member panel be retained to inform the fourth review. So in other words, we retain this panel for the next review starting in October. So that's 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 as per the papers, and I propose those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. So now we can move to questions. Councillors may ask as many questions as they wish. However, they must be relevant to the subject under discussion and must be a question. Have we got any questions? Councillor Mabry, are you asking a question?
Yes, I am. Thank you. It wouldn't come off mute. Yes, thank you, Chairman. My question to Councillor Arthey is, you've mentioned cross-border CIL bids. Could you actually confirm if there is a percentage that is needed for cross-border bids, whether it has to be 52%, for example, from Babergh and 48% from Essex, or is there such a thing, please? If you could confirm, that would be great.
No, there isn't. It would depend on each individual proposal. So in Babergh at the moment, there have been some inquiries, but there are no bids that we're considering at the moment. So this is preparing for the future. One of the reasons to prepare for the future is because there has been in Mid-Suffolk a proposal for contributions from developments in the Thurston area to St Ed's. So the logic behind all of this is that if there are fairly large developments on the edge of our district, it is quite possible that those people, and we're collecting SIL for that development, those people will be using infrastructure outside of our district. It does cut both ways, and it's quite possible that there may be, like for instance, Household Waste and Recycling Centre used by people over the border. You mentioned Essex, so it is quite possible that people might use Sudbury facilities but come outside of district. So yes, it does cut the other way as well. At the moment, there are no fully worked up proposals for Babergh to consider, but this is in preparation so that we can deal with cross-boundary issues in either direction. You've got to remember that some of the other authorities are not SIL levying authorities, so they will be looking to contribute to infrastructure through Section 106 agreements. But if we're asked to contribute, it would be via SIL. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but it prompts another question, if I may, Madam Chairman.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you not think it would, or that you, the SIL team, or any of the SIL officers consider it prudent to actually put some type of percentage on a cross-border?
No, not at all. I mean, I did try and cover that. The point is that what the panel said is that it must be evidence-based. So if there's evidence that the infrastructure that's over the border is going to be used 75% by Babergh residents, then presumably the proposal will be for 75%. It's highly likely that the evidence will point towards much lower usage cross-boundary than that. So it may well be 10%, 20%, 30%. There has been talk from Ipswich about transport improvements in the town, and they so far have quoted a traffic survey that they've done that says that there's a proportion of traffic that comes into Ipswich every day to use its facilities, and they have a figure on that traffic survey that they think should support any proposal they might have for a contribution from us. What we're saying on the panel is that we want proper, full, evidenced research that actually shows the level of usage of infrastructure cross-boundary from any development that might take place, and here we're talking about Sproughton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will keep my further comments for the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maybury. Councillor Hinton, have you got a question?
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you very much. I've got some comments for the debate as well,
okay.
But I'll save those until we get into the debate. Councillor Arthey, you mentioned that some of the surrounding authorities do not have SIL regimes but use 106 monies for their infrastructure. Surely that implies that any effect of any development on their infrastructure is tied down at the time of granting the planning permission, and therefore contributions from our SIL pot would not be necessary.
That only applies if they can attach that 106 to a development. So if you're talking about development that goes cross-boundary, yes, there will be an element of that development where Section 106 contributions will be collected, and there'll be an element of that development where SIL contributions will be collected by us. But there are other situations, and Sproughton is an example. There will be no 106 contributions from the land adjacent to Sproughton that might have been received by Ipswich because there's no development there. So we're talking about strategic infrastructure here. So they would effectively be asking for a contribution towards a sort of an Ipswich-wide project. And they'd be asking for a contribution from our SIL pot, if you like.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Hinton?
Not really, but I'll save any further comments I have for the debate.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions from councillors? Councillor Busby, have you got a question?
Well, just following up on that, Clive, what happens if the development in Broughton that the Ipswich you're referring to is also Section 106 and not SIL?
It doesn't make any difference, does it? Because we are now a SIL charging authority. I get what you're saying here, because some of the older Broughton approvals are not SIL generating. It wouldn't make any difference. I mean, it's the provision of infrastructure. So when the need arises, when the need is identified and it's fully evidenced, they may well ask for a contribution from Babergh. I don't think that any of these proposals are going to be huge. The biggest one that's reared its head so far is the one that I mentioned about transport improvements in Ipswich, and it's kind of early days on that. But I think you can understand that if there is a significant scheme with regard to transport improvements in Ipswich, it would only be expected, I think, that Ipswich would ask for a contribution from neighbouring authorities. What we're saying is, if they get to the stage of asking for it, it must be fully evidenced. So instead of just coming in and saying, right, we think we've got a £20 million scheme and we think you'd like to pay a quarter because you're one of the adjoining authorities, we would turn around and say, well, let's have some evidence of how you've come up with a quarter of £20 million, because it should be based on the required infrastructure. So it's all to do with requiring the evidence to support a proposal.
Would we also have an opportunity to contribute to question the viability of the scheme itself? They haven't got a particularly good reputation for their traffic changes, what with one-way systems, the bridge that wasn't, traffic lights, etc.
Yeah, it would. I hear what you're saying. It would have to be what Christine Thurlow calls oven ready. So it would have to be a scheme that is fully worked up, fully costed. We would, ahead of that, we would require the evidence. But yes, when they get to the actual proposal, we would expect it to be ready to go. We would expect to be the final part of the jigsaw to fund a project, which would then take place.
Okay, thanks.
We're not going to just hand them lots and lots of money and then they're going to wander off, do some sort of I don't know, bridge project or something which never happens, and then say, oh, whoops, we've spent all of your money. That's not going to happen. We would only fund a deliverable project that had got all of its relevant approvals. I think I said that at the start. And we would be kind of the final part of the jigsaw. So we would not be the main contributor to a scheme. We would just be making a contribution.
Great, thank you. Councillor Maybury, another question?
I do, and thank you, Madam Chairman. Just take my hand down before I forget. Thank you. I note, and whilst I do not disapprove, that all SIL bids should be discussed first with a SIL officer. Could Councillor Arthey confirm how much time this takes up from a particular officer's work project? I mean, are we talking 10%, 20%, 50%, please? Thank you.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. What, 10% of what, their time?
Yes, because obviously some SIL bids are, it could be suggested, quite complicated. How much of their time is taken? We do this type of review for planning officers, and I'm just wondering if there was anything that could confirm that, please.
Okay, well, I'll pass that on to Christine Thurlow in a minute, because she heads up the team. I don't know if she's got any idea what sort of proportion of time is actually spent on what I think you're referring to is SIL inquiries, isn't it? Because when somebody shows an interest in the possible submission of a SIL bid, this particularly applies to community bids. The first point of contact, if you like, is the SIL team to make an inquiry, and Christine and her team give all sorts of advice on what might be able to be funded, what percentage might be awarded, what the maximum might be, and any other sources of funding. We still run a community grants programme, and there are other sources of funding out there. We always look for collaborative bids. as I'm sure you're aware. In the last review, we restricted community bids to 75% and £75,000. So putting together a collaborative bid is really, really important for community groups. But if there, I mean, I'm not aware of a percentage of Christine's time or her team's time that's spent on inquiry. But Christine, can you help?
Thank you. I don't have any precise figures about that. All I would say is that we do encourage people to have conversations with us at the earliest possible stage. If we don't do that, what we end up with is a lot of SIL bids which either don't meet the requirements of the scheme, and so therefore we've got decisions that we end up having to resist the project or amend it substantially. The other reason why we encourage people to come to us early on is because we're trying to produce a programme of infrastructure delivery. And I think with the SIL expenditure programmes that we bring to Cabinet, there is a list of infrastructure projects which are now listed in section C of the report, no, B of the report, which actually gives members a flavour of what is being informally discussed, and so they can see which direction infrastructure delivery is moving in. And it also allows us to understand how much investment is needed in order to service all of those projects if we want to support them all. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, Madam Chairman, I think that clarifies the position that it obviously saves time in the long run with the officers if it is done that way. And thank you for the clarification, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mabry. Councillor McCraw.
Actually, just to confirm that, could Christine confirm that's somewhat akin to pre-application advice designed effectively to make the process more efficient and not waste time?
Christine Thurlow, is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor McCraw, you've still got your hand up. Have you a further question?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, we can move to debate. Oh, Councillor Hinton, is that a question or are you opening the debate?
I would like to start on the debate. I think otherwise we'll be going round.
Please proceed. Yes, please proceed. You can open the debate.
Yes, just one point that I would like to make quite strongly, and that is that so as SIL funds are outside of the budget, the fact that the Cabinet decides on the merits of bids is not particularly in line with the Constitution, bearing in mind that their limit is £150,000 within the budget. But SIL is outside of the budget, and anything that's outside of the budget should be decided by full council. And yet full council doesn't get a chance to have a sniff in at any of these things. And I think it's important that council is involved more in these sorts of decisions. Otherwise, we have to ask ourselves, why do we bother with councillors at all? Why don't we just elect 10 people to Cabinet and forget about the rest? So I think we've got to say that cross-border SIL funding, whereas Clive has quite, I think, appropriately said it's going to be about sort of 20 million for a project. These are going to be big projects. They're going to be big projects, are going to be well outside Cabinet spending limit, and should be decided by full council. And then everybody is involved and can have their say and decide on the merits of it.
Chairman, can I just say, I don't know if Councillor Hinton misunderstood that. I was talking about the possible quantum of the amount that Ipswich might require. I wasn't talking about the size of our contribution. I did mention that, you know, they sort of may in initial talks have said, well, you know, perhaps it should be a quarter, a fifth or whatever, which would be several £1,000,000. But the whole point of what we're saying today is that it's not going to work like that. It's going to be based on evidence, and they're going to have to actually show us the scheme. So it's highly unlikely that it would be a significant amount of money in the millions. There is another. Can I respond to another part of that question? Because Councillor Hinton was good enough to give me advanced warning of what he was going to say, and I did take the opportunity of getting a little bit of advice from Emily Yule, just around whether a large SIL award, if there were to be one proposed, would still fall within an executive decision to be made by Cabinet. It may be better if Emily responds, if she's available, responds just to explain the decision for Cabinet and to explain why it wouldn't fall to be a council decision. Before she does that, though, I've got a bit of sympathy with what Councillor Hinton is saying, and I see absolutely no reason why Cabinet shouldn't be given good advance warning, even debate a large contribution if one were to be asked for. But we haven't been asked for one yet.
Thank you. I'll invite our monitoring officer, Emily Yule, to add to the conversation here.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on the point of whether a SIL decision falls to the Cabinet or to the Council, the Local Authorities Function and Responsibilities England Regulations 2000 actually set out the legal framework for decisions that cannot be taken by the Council's executive, i.e. the Cabinet, and therefore mean that those decisions are reserved to the full Council. SIL decisions are not reserved to the full Council, and they are not listed as a local choice function where the Council has discretion about who the decision maker is. So therefore they are executive functions and they fall to the Cabinet to be made. Setting the framework is a council function, hence why the report is here this evening. In terms of financial limits, there is no limit to the decision that the Cabinet can take. Councillor Hinton is right when he has talked about the decisions must be consistent with the Council's approved budget. But of course, with SIL, you cannot budget explicitly for SIL because it is dependent on applications coming forward and the decisions around the SIL amounts that need to be levied against each of those planning decisions. Chair, I hope that it explains the separation of those functions, but I'm happy to provide any further clarity as required.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I could come back on that, I think the monitoring officer has very clearly demonstrated why it should be a Cabinet decision and not a council decision and not a Cabinet decision, because you can't budget for it, and therefore it should be a Cabinet decision rather than, a council decision rather than a Cabinet decision, and it should involve lots of people. If we were on a 106 regime, it would be done by the Planning Committee, not by Cabinet. And the 150,000 is within the budget, whereas we're talking here about considerably more than that.
I think I'm right. Can I just come back on that, Chairman?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying that if it was a 106, it would only be the decision on the 106 that would be made either by Planning Committee or under delegated powers. You wouldn't see it again after that. So with SIL, there's a framework in place and there is an automatic levy. What happens with the money when it's received, like a 106, members would not normally be involved in that. If you cast your mind back, Councillor Hinton, to pre-SIL days, the involvement of councillors was in the setting of the 106 under the provisions of an approval. And once we did that, we had no further part in that expenditure taking place.
So I think
no, but that, Madam Chairman,
Councillor Hinton, I've already you're officially only allowed to speak once, and I've allowed you to speak twice. Unless there's anything more to add to it, Councillor Arthey, I think we'll move on now. Are you happy to do that, Councillor Arthey?
Yes, I am.
More or less, yes. I think we'll move the debate on a bit now, Councillor Hinton. Councillor Mabry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I do actually concur with Councillor Hinton, because this is what I think is worrying me when I ask the pertinent questions about percentage for any cross-border bids. It actually states, and I can't bring it up, and I'm sorry, it's less than number 26. I know that in the SIL framework, that sport and recreation can be 200,000, which is a relatively small amount if you look at the costs of recreation. However, again, it is above the council budget limit that a cabinet can decide on. And I have heard what Emily Ewell, the monitoring officer, has said, but this does leave me with great concern that we could be giving all the decisions to the cabinet over SIL, and I don't actually think it's fair. Councillor Arthey has spoken about S106. Now, he was not around with Chiltern Woods when that was first discussed, the S106 money, and I can assure you, if the parish had not intervened there with S106, that we would never have got any funding for the community hall or community building. So I am really, really worried about this. And I must say, I am erring on to not actually voting for this, because I am really worried about the amount of money that could possibly be given away. It may well be that they are good causes by the cabinet on things that not every member has been able to comment on or is in agreement with. Thank you. I think that's my last and my one and only comment that I'm allowed, but I've made it. So thank you.
Chairman, can I respond to that?
Please do.
Well, only that there's something about what Councillor Mabry has said that implies something that didn't actually happen. The parish council didn't intervene in order to secure a 106. The decision on the conditions and the 106 that was agreed, that was a decision of Babergh District Council. Chiltern Parish Council are not the planning authority. Babergh District Council are, and that condition was attached by virtue of the consent that was granted for the outline by Babergh District Council.
Yes, but
are we veering off the point here?
Originally, there was no money given to the parish for it.
Councillors, can I just ask you to keep to the point of the debate that we're meant to be discussing here today, please, rather than getting on to individual cases. Alistair Muscraw, have you got something you'd like to contribute to the debate?
That's a new variation on my name.
Sorry, my apologies.
Alistair Mayor, I must admit, that's a new one on me, and I've heard them all.
My apologies.
That's not a problem. I'm thinking we may be getting dragged down into somewhat hypothetical discussions here, and they're intensely hypothetical. We have not received such a bid in the past. And I have a great deal of confidence in the SIL team's work and the infrastructure delivery plan and the rest of the work that has been done, because we've looked at it so often. A couple of points that come to my mind here are one, that it is not our money. It is ring-fenced infrastructure funds. It does not form part of the budget. And there is a thought that crosses my mind that if the decision made on such a hypothetical case were to be a cabinet decision, I would have thought it would have been subject to call-in under the call-in procedures contained in the Constitution, in which case there would be a perfect opportunity at that point for a call-in process to take place where there were such concerns, obviously, as in all call-ins, specific to the individual circumstances. Now, it might be that we need the monitoring officer to confirm that these decisions are subject to call-in, but as an executive decision, I can't see how they are not. They are subject to a decision notice. Therefore, I would believe they must be.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. The monitoring officer is going to make a comment here.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to confirm the comments made by Councillor McCraw. These decisions made by Cabinet are subject to the call-in rules. Chair, if I may, I wouldn't normally step in during the debating section, but I did just want to add some clarity to some of the comments that have been made. Firstly, in respect of these decisions being an executive function, whilst we operate a Cabinet model of governance, we are bound by the 2000 regulations that I quoted earlier, which set out the functions that must be assigned to the executive, cabinet, and the functions that must be reserved to council. We cannot alter that. The council does not have the power to supersede that legislation. Therefore, the legislation says that SIL decisions are an executive function, and therefore the cabinet must make it. It cannot be referred by this council to itself for decision making. The second point, Chair, is just around the financial limit that councillors are mentioning. I think there may be some confusion with the key decision threshold. Cabinet is not limited as to the value of decisions it can make. However, we do have a key decision threshold of £150,000, and that threshold requires that the decision is published for 28 days on the forthcoming decisions list before the Cabinet can take the decision. It doesn't prevent the Cabinet from taking that decision, it just requires that the decision is publicly advertised in advance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
My point, though, Chair, and I think it's an important one, is that if members were ever to have such concerns over a large SIL bid, they would have the call-in procedure to fall back upon. There is therefore a system in place for council to have some oversight in the matter.
Thank you. Councillor Holt.
Thank you. I think Emily may well have answered my question, which was really going to be, if Cabinet was so decided to refer an application to full council for debate, could they do so? But from what Emily just said, the full council could possibly debate it prior to a Cabinet decision, but it still ultimately would be a Cabinet decision. Is that right, Emily? Could we refer it to council for a debate and it came back to Cabinet for a decision after that debate?
Through you, Chair, that's exactly right, Councillor Holt. The Cabinet could refer for debate only, and then the decision is still within the hands of the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any more people who want to join the debate? Any more councillors wishing to speak? Is there anything else you'd like to say, Councillor Arthey?
No, Chairman, I think Councillor McCraw and Councillor Holt have really answered the questions that I was preparing to answer. So, I mean, I don't think that anybody ought to be afraid. I think there are two issues really. One is the governance model, and that's a debate for another day. If people don't agree with the Cabinet model of governance, that's something that could be changed in the future. I think that where Councillor Hinton is coming from is that it seems that there are a lot of important decisions that are reserved for Cabinet. I don't think necessarily this is one that should worry members particularly. It's the SIL framework that we've had for the last 3 years. It's changing it to adapt to likely proposals coming forward. the same decision-making criteria will exist as do at present, with the additional caveat, if you like, that cross-boundary issues will not be delegated if they fall below the 10,000 threshold. All cross-boundary issues will come to Cabinet. And Councillor Holt and Councillor McCraw have outlined what can happen if large applications come forward, and Cabinet can, if they want, refer to Council or to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The last thing that I would add is that every year Overview and Scrutiny look at not only the changes to the SIL framework, but the performance of SIL generally. And I think, I don't know if you can invite Councillor McCraw to speak again, but I think that Overview and Scrutiny have on all occasions thus far been particularly pleased with the way that SIL has worked for us.
Councillor McCraw, did you want to make any statement here?
Only to agree with Councillor Arthey's statement. We've been impressed with the work of the SIL framework members group. We've been impressed with the work which SIL has undertaken. I think one of the appendices contains a careful tracking of every single SIL bid. In many instances, SIL money has actually been returned to the fund, something I note. I also note that we have quite a large amount of SIL money within the fund, and I know Councillor Arthey has become concerned about that at some point. This is a time where people really need to be thinking about getting their bids together. No, effectively, the great advantage that has been obvious is that the SIL framework has developed, that it has become, it's reactive and proactive. This is an example of being proactive, not reactive, but we know that these larger bids will come forward because that is the way that the world is moving.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw.
Okay, could I finally then, if we have finished, could
Yes.
I just thank the members of the panel for their contributions? It's a panel that works very, very well. So we'd like to carry on with that. That's part of one of the recommendations. And also to thank Christine and her team. Christine set up a new team when we implemented SIL. And if any of you get involved in any community bids in your ward, you will know how incredibly helpful the SIL team are, from initial first inquiry all the way through. So if any of you have in your wards a potential infrastructure project, a community infrastructure project, please have a word with Christine, have a word with Joe, have a word with the team, and they offer incredible help. They really do. They're fantastic. So thank you very much to the team as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. So I think we're now ready to move to the vote. Councillor Arthey earlier in his presentation stated the recommendations for us to vote on very clearly, and now you've heard the debate. So I think we're now ready to go to the vote. So I'll now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, can you open the vote in the modern.gov app by clicking the plus sign in the top right hand of the agenda screen and selecting attendance and voting? The voting tab for this agenda item will show in blue, and please click on that blue line to open the vote. Thank you. Councillor Beer, are you able to vote, or would you like to make your vote verbally? Councillor Beer, are you able to vote?
Oh, it's gone.
Would you like to make it verbally?
Yes, I support the recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
I've got to the photo, and then when you spoke to me, I pressed the mic, and that took the whole lot off the screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's 25 for, 3 against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you. So that is carried. We'll move on now to item 10, paper BC 2031, response to the consultation on the future of the new homes bonus. I would like to invite Councillor Ward to introduce paper BC 2031 and to move the recommendations in the report. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce report BC 2031, the response to the consultation on the future of new homes bonus. The long-awaited consultation on the replacement for new homes bonus was finally published by the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government on the 10th of February with an 8-week consultation window. The monitoring officer has concluded that this consultation is of sufficient significance for it to be referred to full council for a response, as consultation responses are normally delegated to the relevant assistant director under the council's constitution. Due to the short timescale offered by MHCLG, it was not possible for officers to prepare a draft response to be considered at our meeting today. So it is proposed that a joint cross-party working group is established to agree a response with the Assistant Director for Corporate Resources for submission by the deadline of 7th of April. The proposed membership of the group is set out in paragraph 4.6 of the report. I should also remind you, as set out in the report at paragraph 4.7, that all councillors are entitled to make their own personal response to the consultation if they so wish. I would like to propose the recommendations as set out in 3.1 and 3.2 and would ask for a seconder, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Jan Osborne, are you offering to second this proposal?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now move to questions. Have you got some questions? Councillor Lindsay, have you got a question? Councillor Lindsay.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Chair. Just on the method of consultation, 4.6, the membership of the working group. You've got 2 cabinet members, and then 2 councillors from the Independent, Green, Liberal Democrat or Labour group. The Independent and Liberal Democrat groups are not in the opposition, they're on the cabinet. So you could end up with 4 cabinet members there. If you look at the way the Mid-Suffolk have done it, you've got 2 cabinet members and 2 people from the opposition. So I'd submit that only Green and Labour are in the opposition in this council, and so the councillors should be selected from that group. Thank you.
Councillor Hinton, did you have a comment as well?
I have a point on that same paragraph, actually, 4.6. And that is, it seems a bit strange that within Babergh we're talking, I'm not really concerned about what Mid-Suffolk get up to, but within Babergh we're talking about the Cabinet Member for Finance, yes, we're talking about New Homes Bonus, which is money-based. Cabinet Member for Housing, well, the Cabinet Member for Housing is responsible for all council housing, not for open market housing, so the best person to be put into that position would be the Cabinet Member for Planning, which would be a much more appropriate position to put in the person to have on that particular makeup. As far as the remaining 2 councillors are concerned, that would have to be up to the leaders to sort out.
Seem to have moved into debate, but nevertheless, Councillor McCraw, did you have a question?
I suspect I'd best leave it for debate.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions that?
Madam Chairman, if I could just come back on that.
Is it with a question at this stage, please?
That was in an attempt at a sort of question to stop me from having too much of a restriction when it came to the debate, in that why isn't it the cabinet member for planning rather than the cabinet member for housing?
Okay, Councillor Ward, would you like to answer that question, please?
We just decided that it would be the cabinet member for housing. It could equally be the cabinet member for planning, but I can take that offline with those two cabinet members concerned and discuss that with them. But it's not really something that I can decide on at this stage immediately here and now.
Fine. If there are no other questions, we could move to...
Chairman.
Oh, yes, you have another question. Yes, Councillor Hinton.
I understood that this was in actual fact going to be a council decision, not a leader decision. So why can't we make that decision now?
Amendment.
You've all gone very quiet.
We can make an amendment, and if you'd like to propose that as an amendment, we can,
yes, I'll quite happily
do that, and then we can debate the amendment.
I would certainly like to propose that as an amendment then.
Okay. Councillor Ward, would you accept that amendment?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Hinton, I need to ask you, do you have a seconder? Is there a seconder for your amendment? Is that Councillor Plum? Would you like to second that?
I will second that amendment.
Fine. Councillor Ward, would you like to accept that amendment?
Yes.
Fine. In that case, we'll ask questions to the amendment. No, debate.
Sorry, Chair. Could we have the amendment
sorry,
read out?
I'm sorry, Councillor Lindsay.
I'm not sure what the amendment is. Could we have the amendment read out?
Yes. Our monitoring officer is just going to come in here. Thank you. Yeah.
Chair, for the avoidance of doubt, Councillor Hinton, seconded by Councillor Plum, have proposed that in 4.6, the Cabinet Member for Planning is a member of the Joint Council Cross-Party Working Group rather than the Cabinet Member for Housing. The proposer of the report, Councillor Ward, has accepted that amendment. So that now becomes the substantive motion. So essentially the recommendation stays the same, Chair, but the membership is now the Cabinet Member for Finance, the Cabinet Member for Planning, and then two other members to be agreed by the leaders of the relevant political groups listed in 4.6. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emily. Councillor McCraw, did you want to say anything?
Just a point that can surely only be the case for the Babergh membership of the working group. It cannot be for Mid Suffolk.
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. I mean, if an amendment is put forward on those lines, is there any particular reason why we can't select all four members? We could have proposals come forward, couldn't we, from the Greens, Liberal Democrats and Labour for two people. So we could end up actually knowing who all four are. Otherwise, we're going to leave the other two members of that group to, I don't know what some sort of smoky room discussion, and then two drop out. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if Councillor Lindsay, as leader of the Green group, has got somebody in mind. I don't know if Liberal Democrats or Labour have, but I mean, if you have, why don't you just say so and we'll sort it all out and we've got a group.
Councillor Lindsay.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Arthey. We do have someone in mind, Councillor Jane Gould.
Right. So, and Councillor Ward, any comments you wanted to make here?
Happy to accept Councillor Gould on that working group, yeah.
Fine. Councillor Holt.
Yes, just a point. It's all very well mentioning in 4.6 that two councillors from Independent, Green and Liberal Democrat and Labour, but what about Conservatives? It seems rather discriminative to exclude the Conservative group from potentially having a second councillor mentioned on there. I just think it's unfair that Conservatives aren't mentioned. Going to include the rest. It should include all.
But the cabinet member for finance is already on the group.
This isn't about the breakdown. This isn't about the breakdown of it. All I'm saying is, for fairness, it should be all the groups. Whether the Conservatives wanted to add someone or put someone forward is another matter, but it should include all the remaining groups. That would be my position. I just want to make that clear. I think it's unfair not to include everyone.
Okay, you've stated your position. Thank you, Councillor Holt. Councillor Beer. Councillor Beer, would you like to say something, please, to this?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I support what Councillor Holt has just said. I think that if we're going to do this at the 11th hour, we're putting all names in the hat. The leader of the council is being forced in a position to accept names. I think we should all be able to vote on this separately. And I think that the 4 names should be put in the hat. Of whatever political parties they come from.
Thank you.
So I don't have a problem with Councillor Councillor Osborne or Councillor Arthey.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. Councillor Davis. Councillor Derek Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. No, I agree with pretty much both of what's just been said. Quite frankly, it should be the best person for the job. I'm totally supportive of Councillor Gould. I know she would do an excellent job, and if there are others that would like to be considered, and the leader, because let's not forget he is the leader. Are there, but surely it's the best person for the job, irrespective of the parties.
Councillor Ward, is there anything you'd like to add?
Right. Well, let's try and get this sorted out now, as everyone really wants to, and I think that's a good idea. So we have the cabinet member for finance proposed here, the cabinet member for planning, Councillor Gould, and for the 4th member, I would still like to propose Councillor Jan Osborne. So that, for me, is the 4-member working group that I would like to see.
So
I will second that, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. We now have the 4 members on the panel laid before us. Would anyone like to comment on that composition?
Chair.
Is that Councillor Alistair McCraw?
It is indeed.
Right, would you like to speak?
I think I have something of a solution, because when Councillor Lindsay raised this question, it came to my mind that the situation at Mid Suffolk and ourselves are different. Mid Suffolk has a virtually split Conservative opposition alignment and equality of representation according to something of the number of seats is something we've used in all our committees. So I would suggest for Babergh that 2 Conservatives made up for whatever position they may come from, as Councillor Ward has suggested. There's no reason why you couldn't have 3 cabinet members, an independent or a Liberal Democrat or late. Well, I think it would be sensible to have an independent there. This happens to be Councillor Arthey, and a Green, and I'd fully support that. Effectively, 2 Conservatives, 1 independent and 1 Green is a vastly superior way of reflecting the makeup of this council, and that's the basis on which I think we should proceed.
Has anyone else got any comment that they'd like to add to that? Preferably from someone who hasn't spoken to date. Sue Carpendale, Councillor Carpendale.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself in agreement with Councillor Holt and with Councillor McCraw. It seems a very sensible solution. I'm not terribly happy with making decisions on the hoof, but I do think this would work.
Thank you for that. Councillor Arthey, your hand is still up. Did you want to make a comment?
I did, but not anymore.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you. Yes, I think I am aware that it's rather a decision made on the hoof.
Yes.
I had a conversation with Councillor Lindsay this afternoon before Councillor Lindsay brought it up. I wouldn't want you thinking that I was as surprised as you were, John. Sorry, Mr. Leader, Councillor Ward. But I would enjoy doing the job. So thank you very much for your support of me, and we'll see where it leads. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, we seem to be coming to some conclusion here, even though it wasn't the original intention of this meeting. Councillor Osborne, Councillor Jan Osborne, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. As my name has been mentioned several times, I feel perhaps I better should come in. Yeah, no, I'm more than happy to sit on this group, and it has been alluded to that I'm responsible for social housing, but actually all the parts of housing comes into my remit in one way or another as part of my responsibility. So I would very much like to sit on this group. I do have a full understanding of new homes bonus and housing, so I'm more than happy to sit on this group as suggested by our leader, Councillor Ward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Beer, your hand is still up. Did you want to say something?
Oh, it shouldn't be. I'll put it down. Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. No problem. Thank you. So we seem to have come to a conclusion here. We seem to have the full makeup of the panel. So I think we can vote on that now. The debate seems to have completed. So I think our monitoring officer has already told us what we will be voting for. If everyone's clear on that, we now seem to have the full makeup of the group. So I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we have amended those recommendations so that 4.6 is as amended. So thank you. So councillors, if you could open the vote in the modern.gov app by clicking the plus sign in the top right hand agenda screen and selecting attendance and voting. That vote will now show in blue, and please click on the blue line to open the vote. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks.
Councillor Newman, are you able to vote? Would you like to do it manually? Actually, we have now received it. Thank you. Chair, that is 28 for and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you. So that vote is carried. Thank you. So now we'll move on to item 11, BC 2032, Pay Policy Statement 2021 to 22 and the Gender Pay Gap. I would like to invite Councillor Ward to introduce paper BC 2032 and to move the recommendations in the report. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce report BC 2032, the Pay Policy Statement 2021 to 22 and Gender Pay Gap Report. We are required by the 2011 Localism Act to prepare and publish a pay policy statement that is approved by Council, and by the 2010 Equality Act to report on our gender pay gap. The latter does not have to be approved by Council. As the two councils have a single organisational structure with harmonised pay, grades, terms and conditions of service, a single pay policy statement is produced which covers both councils. Last year, the statement was contained within the budget report in February 2020, but due to the recent changes to the senior leadership team announced by the Chief Executive last week, it was not possible to reflect these changes and meet the timetable for the February Council meeting, and hence it is being presented to Council today. Paragraph 3.3 of the report sets out the key information that is contained within the statement at Appendix A, and paragraph 3.4 highlights the changes made compared to the statement for the current year. The gender pay gap report is normally published by 31st of March each year, but due to the impact of COVID, this has been extended to the 31st of October, so the report is not yet available. As we are two sovereign councils, a gender pay gap report has to be published for each council, but the combined data is more relevant due to our workforce being fully integrated. Some of you may have spotted that within the risk section of the report, the first and third risks are repeated. This is an error and it should only have been in there once. I would like to propose the recommendations as set out in 2.1 and 2.2 and would ask for a seconder. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have, and with me are Suzanne Hughes, our Head of HR and Organisational Development, who many of you will not have met before, and Catherine Steele, the Assistant Director, to assist me with this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Arthey, are you proposing being seconded?
Thank you.
Thank you. So have we got any questions? We'll now move to questions. Do you have any questions on this report? If there are no questions, you can move to debate. Does anyone like to open the debate? You're allowed to speak for 3 minutes and speak once. So if there's no one wishing to open the debate, we can move straight to the vote. And just to remind councillors what the recommendations are, I'll read those recommendations out. So the recommendation 2.1, that the proposed pay policy statement for 2001 to 22, as set out in section B, be approved. 2.2, that publication of the Council's gender pay gap as of 31st March 2020 be noted. So as there are no questions and no one wished to open a debate, we'll move straight to the vote. I'll now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the vote is now open. Please click on the plus sign in the top right-hand agenda screen and select attendance and voting. That vote will now show in blue. Please click on the blue line to open the vote. Thank you. Councillors, you will also need to scroll down for this vote. Thank you. Councillor Beer, are you able to vote, or would you like to give your vote verbally? Councillor Beer, are you able to? Can you hear me? Okay, we're...
You're on mute.
Councillor Beer, are you able to vote? Okay, we will move on without Councillor Beer's vote. Thank you. Chair, that is unanimous.
Thank you. So that was a unanimous vote, so it's carried. Thank you. Item 12, BC 2033, appointment of the Independent Remuneration Panel. I would like to invite the Corporate Manager for Governance and Civic Office to introduce paper BC 2033.
Thank you, Chair. The current panel that was appointed in 2016 has now reached the end of their term. Under the Local Authorities Members' Allowances England Regulations 2003, the Council is required to establish and maintain a panel known as the Independent Remuneration Panel to make recommendations and amendments of the Members' Allowances Scheme. A recruitment exercise has been undertaken. Candidates were selected from applicants who had made a formal application and underwent a competitive interview. Council is therefore asked to approve the formal appointment of the recommended panel members for 4 years, with an option to extend this for another 4 years, and also to confirm the fee payable for each review and also the payment of reasonable expenses. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a proposer, please?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, Councillor Ward, thank you.
We have to propose. Thank you. And just a quick comment. We have 5 candidates here, and you'll read their details. They're all 5 excellent candidates. I think it will make an excellent panel.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
And me.
Thank you.
Take your pick.
Councillor Davis, I'll go for Councillor Davis. Thank you, you spoke first. Thank you. So we'll now move to questions. Councillors may ask as many questions as they wish, however, they must be relevant to the subject under discussion and must be a question. Councillor Hinton, have you got a question?
Yes, quick question. Nowhere within the sort of resumes that have been put forward does it give any strong indications as to where these applicants reside, and as such means that we don't really know what might be considered reasonable expenses in the recommendation. So could we know where they actually live?
Chair, just to clarify, we're not able to put obviously the people's addresses. We have 3 members that live in the district and 2 that are outside. Their reasonable expenses we're hoping to conduct most of the meetings virtually and all of the interviews, so the expenses would be very minimal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wondered how often does this panel, we're expecting them to do a review? Is it just once in the 4 years that they're appointed, or every year, or every 6 months, or what?
Chair, a lot of it would depend on the circumstances. We would expect it to be 1 or 2 possibly reviews, unless there were any changes to governance arrangements or any other arrangements which could see councillors' duties be expanded or retracted even. So it would literally depend on the circumstances within those 4 years, but looking at it sensibly, probably 1 or 2 at the most.
Okay, thank you. I'll have an observation, but I'll come back to that when it goes to debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I think, can I save mine for debate? I think it's probably
Yes,
more of a debate than a question.
Yeah. Councillor Malvisi, have you got a question?
I do, Madam Chairman. How many 4-year terms have they done?
Chair, they have not done any so far. They are a completely new panel from the panel that was there previously.
Okay, thank you.
Has anyone else got any questions? So if there are no more questions, we can move to the debate. Councillors will only be allowed to speak once for 3 minutes, and this will be timed. Councillor Arthey, I think you were saving your question for the debate.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to make a point, really. I mean, members will note at paragraph 7.1 1. The council appoints the panel and should have regard to the views of the panel when they're expressed. I just kind of hope that happens, because I've seen lots of these take place. I've been on the council for 30 years now, and what tends to happen is that the responsibilities, the time commitments, comparisons with other authorities, they're all provided to the panel, and the panel come up with what they think is a fair remuneration. It then goes to council and we slash it. So we're always behind what the panel recommends. So you kind of think, what's the point of having a panel? Because whatever they recommend, we're not going to agree it. I think Mid Suffolk did last time. So we've got the strange situation where our leader is not remunerated as well as Mid Suffolk's leader for the responsibilities that he takes on. And I will say now that I don't think anybody should underestimate the amount of time and commitment that John Ward gives to his role as leader. I know that a lot of the things that we do aren't popular with everybody in the district, and there are people who disagree with some things that would say, well, he shouldn't be there at all, type of thing. But John's commitment to the council and the amount of time that he puts in as leader, I mean, I'm deputy leader, so I get to know about the things that John has to do. He's got the finance portfolio as well. And if I'm really honest, I think it's almost an insult, the amount that we remunerate a leader. It may well be that we have the governance model argument in a year or two's time, and we may not have a cabinet and a leader. But while we do, I think people who take on these additional responsibilities and the time commitment that goes with them, I really don't feel are properly remunerated for the extra work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Councillor Lindsay.
Yes, thank you again. So my thoughts on this is that I mean, I'm not sure, going back when in the past remuneration panels like this have made their recommendations, but the timing is key, because I feel as a matter of principle that we should have recommendations before the end of our terms as councillors, and then we vote as councillors for the new council, the remuneration of the new council that comes after the elections, rather than voting for basically our own allowances. So I think it's really important that we get recommendations. Yes, they should be listened to. Councillor Arthur is right, but the timing of it is so important. We need recommendations for the next regime, the next set of councillors, so that if we are intending to stay on and hope to get re-elected, we can face the electorate and explain why we, and they can make a judgment why if we want to increase the allowances, why we need to do so. But I think if we get a recommendation immediately after everyone's re-elected, or not, when there's a new council and the new councillors vote on it, it's like you're voting for your own remuneration, and it's immediately after the election, so the electorate immediately suspect a rat, and I just think it makes us look bad. So timing is key, is what I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Hinton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, to a certain extent, I agree with what Councillor Lindsay said, but I would also say that timing is the essence from the point of view that it can be used, politicised, and used against sitting councillors by the electorate. So it's a difficult one to get right. If you vote for remuneration increases or whatever just before an election, the electorate can turn around and say, oh, I see, they're voting for more money for themselves if they get re-elected, so we'll make sure they don't get re-elected. So it's a double-edged weapon, and it's something that is very difficult to get right. And I think what we've got to do is to make sure that we promote the fact that the Remunerations Board is independent, and then take it from there.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you. And very similar thoughts to both Councillor Hinton and Councillor Lindsay. But what I would say is I think it's really, really important that all councillors engage in the process. Yeah, we've been through this before. Some of us have been through this before. I voted against the recommendations last time because I thought our increases were disproportionate to the increases the council officers were getting. Hopefully this time round, because we will be keeping up, if you like, and there won't be such a huge gap. And I'm certainly not preempting what the independent members would do, but it's really important that all council members give the independent members, when they're doing their research, all the information they can. And I think it's important, and I think this is where the timing would be less critical, is that we are not making huge jumps in our allowances. But I would also agree with Councillor Arthey that we were we got left behind in terms of the leader and some of the other allowances. But that's, I think, is because there'd been a failure, if you like, in what had happened beforehand. So yes, it's important that the independent members get all the information they can, and they come up with a very, very agreeable solution, and we don't smash it, we don't knock it down, because it's acceptable to all of us, on all groups, on all sides of it. So that's why I think it's important that this independent panel get all the support that we as councillors can give them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Maybury.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've been listening to this. I do a lot of listening and reflecting. And I would agree with quite a bit of what Councillor Hinton and Councillor Lindsay have said. However, I do think that there is a little bit of strange commenting from certain members, because I well remember when the cabinet was first formed, some who are now in the cabinet, who were in the opposition at that time, totally voted against any allowance for cabinet members. So I do find this a bit double-edged. And it is really interesting to hear these people actually say, oh, we must make sure that the remuneration panel get all the information. And I just find it quite ironic that they would be saying things like that. And there's lots of hands coming up, so I expect I will be getting some comments. But I will reiterate again, and this is recorded, that many of those who are commenting that we must listen to the remuneration panel, etc., were those who were dead against giving any allowance to the cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maybury. Councillor Ward.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure how relevant that last statement was to the matter at hand. All we're debating today is whether we want to appoint these 5 members as our panel. We're not talking about the possible recommendations they might make at some point in the future. We're not talking about whether the allowances we have at the moment are too low, too high, just about right, or whatever. We're talking about appointing a panel, and we should just focus on that. Are these 5 people the ones we want?
Thank you, Councillor Ward, and indeed you're correct. Councillor McCraw, were you going to talk about these individuals on the independent remuneration panel?
No, just the principle of having a remuneration panel rather implies that we could take the politics out of this. It's been referred to about timing. Perhaps the matter of timing and the politics of it could be taken out of it by simply letting the remuneration panel do their job. I've always felt and stated that we need people to be able to be councillors, And for that to be the case, reasonable expenses are required. A member's allowance is required. That's a basic principle I think that should apply in all forms of government. So let them do their job, appoint them, and let them decide when the best time to hold their next set of meetings, perhaps in conversation with the monitoring officer or the governance officers. I'm very happy to support this motion, and I think we should waste no further time on it.
Thank you. It doesn't look as if there's anyone else that wants to join in the debate now anyway. So in that case, we'll move to the recommendations. I'll just read those out. Recommendation 3.1, that the following persons be appointed to the Council's Independent Remuneration Panel: Amanda Orchard, Sarah Way, Monica Calibio, John Clough and Sue Putters. Recommendation 3.2, that the IRP members each be paid £500 for each review carried out and being reimbursed any expenses reasonably incurred in the performance of their duties. 3.3, that the IRP be appointed for a period of 4 years with the option to extend this for another period of 4 years if required. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the vote is now open. Please go to the attendance and voting button and press the line will show in blue, and please click on the blue line to open the vote. Thank you. Councillor Cresswell, are you able to do the vote, or would you like to place it verbally? Okay, we have now got Councillor Cresswell's. Councillor Beer, are you still in the meeting? Okay, we'll go ahead anyway. Chair, the vote is 26 for and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you. So that vote is carried. Item 13 on our agenda, councillor appointments. I refer you to paper BC 2034 in the tabled papers. I would like to invite the monitoring officer to introduce paper BC 2034. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Following the resignation of Councillor Granger Howard, it is necessary for us to recalculate the allocation of seats, of committee seats, to political groups to reflect the vacant seat on the council. After reviewing those calculations, the only group that's affected is the Conservative group, and the seat to be lost is on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Therefore, the council needs to confirm the new allocations as detailed in Appendix A and note the change of membership. And I would ask the leader of the Conservative group, Councillor Ward, to just confirm the name of the councillor who will be stepping down from that committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emily. Councillor Dawson will be stepping down from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Could I have a proposer?
I'm happy to propose it, Councillor Dawson.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. And a seconder, please.
Yeah, I will, Dave Busby.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Are there any questions on this? No questions? So if there are no questions, we'll now move straight to the electronic vote. can I ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote?
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now open if councillors would like to place their vote. Thank you. Chair, that is 26 for and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you. So that vote is carried. Thank you. So we're now coming towards the end of our meeting this evening. Our next meeting is May, which will be our annual meeting. But prior to that, I would just like to say that this is probably my last full meeting that I'll be taking. So I just wanted to take the opportunity today of thanking everyone for their support, particularly the officers, but also fellow councillors. I've very much enjoyed my time. I will speak further at the annual meeting in May. I'm sure you won't be able to stop me. And but I just wanted to say thank you all very much for all your support through these meetings that have been very different from the normal way that we are used to having our meetings prior to this time. And in particular, as I say, the support of the officers who've had to handle a new way of working, which we've all been going through here, which has been quite an interesting prospect for all of us. And I think we're just about there with getting hold of how to handle it all now. So thank you all very much for your patience and support. Councillor Busby, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think you've been a star. Well done.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you.
I agree.
Oh, thank you. Gosh,
Me
I don't
too.
want to
Me three.
end up crying on camera.
Well done, Catherine.
General affirmation all round, I think.
Yeah,
Goodness
absolutely.
me. That's so kind. Thank you.
I think, Catherine, if I could just add, I'll join those thanks as well. But just to say that a particular thanks. I mean, you've had the most difficult year that any council chairman could have had for chairing council meetings. Some people may not realise that every time we have a council meeting, you have to trot off to Endeavour House, so that you've got all of the IT and support that you need to conduct the meeting. And you have done a fantastic job. So it is a big, big thank you. Well done.
Well done. Thank you. Thank
Well done.
you for all your support and patience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Well, just to say, no, it's a pleasure. And thank you, Adrian, for your support as my vice chairman. I just want to mention that the date of the next meeting, which is the annual meeting, is Tuesday, 25th of May, and it will be at 5:30. So I now will close the meeting, but I would like you all to stay present don't sign off yet, as the monitoring officer would like to make a statement about future meetings. So thank you all very much. Please stay online for now. The public part of the meeting will now close. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.